Okay, we've talked about the oscillator section, but when we talked about the oscillator section, I left out a description of the sync and ring function because I wanted to make one video focusing on the sync and ring functions because they are interesting. Okay, so that's where we're at. So right now I have the synthesizer set to a very simple patch that's just a sawtooth wave coming out of oscillator 2 and just a sustained envelope generator setting. Okay, so if you'll remember, synchronization is when one oscillator's wave shape is forced to restart at the point at which another oscillator's wave shape restarts its shape. So, for example, we have a sawtooth wave. The wave is periodic. That means it repeats. So every time it repeats, that's its restarting of its wave shape. So that is forced to occur when the first oscillator's wave shape restarts. Now, if both oscillators are at the same frequency, meaning their wave shape restarts at the same time anyway, there isn't a strong effect that you can notice. Let's listen. Now I'm turning on the sync. If anything, we just got a little frequency of an octave lower that has made its way into the sound. And don't be afraid to use sync at this level right here. Because come on, you just changed the timbre of oscillator 2 so that the oscillator's sawtooth wave has a deeper sound. That's cool. So right off the bat, we have a purpose for sync, even if we don't delve into its more crazy attributes. And keep in mind that this is true for all of the shapes you can create with your shape knob. They're all different simply by turning sync on. I just made a liar out of myself. Sometimes the differences are subtle. But you can hear them. And let's face it, synthesis is the process of authoring wave shapes. So right now you are engaging in the authorship of wave shapes just by this subtle effect of having one oscillator align its waveform restart with another oscillator at the same frequency. But anyway, the real excitement from the sync function comes when we start to change the pitch of oscillator 2, and it has to restart its wave shape even though its frequency is changing, which always seems kind of like wave shape cruelty to me. It's oscillator cruelty. Anyway, we can hear this effect by turning the pitch knob. So you can hear the effect when we turn the knob, and actually you can actually see the effect taking place. Let's look. See how it isn't able to complete its entire wave shape and it has to restart? You can see it not making the entirety of a sawtooth and then having to restart right there. So you can actually see the effect. Now, even so, right now, having turned that pitch knob a little bit differently, we've created a new waveform. And again, you're engaging in synthesis just by doing this. This isn't your standard sync sound like the Cars song Let's Go, of course. But you have created a new wave shape that you can just play like a wave, you know? So you have really extended the capability for oscillator 2 to create different waveforms. That's important and awesome. Okay, and don't forget that even if we start turning this shape knob, the waveform still has to reset. Oscillator 2 still has to reset according to oscillator 1. So you start getting weird, different wave shapes than you would have gotten if the sync wasn't on. Kind of digital sounding stuff. See, you got all kinds, a crazy amount of timbral possibility by doing this. And see, it would not be that way if we didn't have sync on. Here, I'll turn it off. Very, very different. So, yeah, that's really cool. And so far, again, we haven't even touched on the way that we most typically use sync. And that says a lot. That's why this deserves its own video, because I want to show you that this is a font of timbral possibility. Okay, so now let's talk about the more standard popular usage of VCO2. We can apply the envelope generator to the pitch of VCO2, and as we demonstrated, changing the pitch of VCO2 creates this weird timbral effect that we know of as sync. So let's apply that. You have to set it to pitch 2. If you set it to pitch 1, you'll still get the effect, but you won't get pitches because oscillator 1's pitch is changing too. And you can create some really cool effects by doing that. But right now, let's focus on sort of this traditional usage by setting this to pitch 2. We'll set it down here to gate. And then we can, whatever we set the envelope generator's attack into K2, it will affect the pitch of oscillator 2, thereby creating the sync effect. And you can see the frequency of oscillator 2 changing because we see the wave getting more and more condensed. That means more movement up and down is happening within less time, which means higher frequency. See why I love this window? It helps me teach all of these concepts. And of course, changing the frequency of oscillator 2 while this is occurring will also create different effects. So that's a lot of fun. You can make it into an articulation sort of situation like this. Or make it more into a little scoopy thing. By messing with the intensity, you mess with the intensity and you'll create different effects. Again, a huge amount of possibility. By changing the shape, you'll get different timbres. It's really, really very powerful, either as a source of different timbres or a source of these sorts of effects that we're showing here. And we still don't have oscillator 1 on. We're just hearing the oscillator 2. So like you can make the effect pretty overt like that. Bring in oscillator 1. And even back off oscillator 2 so that you don't hear the effect quite as much. So, yeah, tiny synthesizer, limited functionality, but even so, they've given you so much to work with in regard to creating sounds. You can back it off so that it actually is a really subtle sort of thing. We still don't even have any filter thing going on here. Interesting stuff. So that's what you can do with the sync. Because largely, well, we can also do something else here. I'm going to turn the envelope generator off for a second so we can do some experiments. The LFO doesn't have the ability to modulate only oscillator 2. So if you do use the LFO on pitch, it's going to be changing the frequency of oscillator 1 and oscillator 2 at the same time. So that's going to sound like this. Still a nice effect, but since the frequency between oscillator 1 and oscillator 2 does not change, even though they're both changing together, you don't get the sync effect as much. However, we can still mess with the sync effect by setting it to shape. So if we modulate the shape while we're modulating the frequency of oscillator 2 while it's synced to oscillator 1, we will get some interesting effects. Changing the frequency of oscillator 2 makes it a little more overt. Or even if we have this effect, the envelope effect going, we can also hear some different things. Watch the waveform when we do this. There's a lot going on there. So your sync effect still is doing some interesting stuff. And we can also change the LFO setting to like fast, and then things are going to go insane. Okay, and a lot of those weird effects that I was doing that were happening as I was turning the knob, you can always program those knob turns into your motion sequencing and get that effect every single time you play. So any of those weird nether region modulation sounds that I was generating, you can recreate those for performance, which is just awesome. Okay, now we're going to step away from the sync. I mean, holy cow, we just spent 15 minutes talking about it. Okay, let's go back over to ring. Now, what happens with ring is you are basically getting the sum and differences of oscillator 1 and oscillator 2. Oh, we have a different frequency here. So the effect can be interesting, like is happening right now. But again, we get into some really interesting outcomes when we change the frequency and wave shape of the oscillators involved. And primarily the pitch. Holy cow. See, I'm changing the shape of oscillator 1, which we can't even hear right now, and it's having an effect on the output of the ring modulator. This is real electronic music history sort of stuff. So the ring modulator, of course, since changing the frequency generates such an interesting outcome, again, if we go over to things that change frequency, we're going to get something exciting. Like, for example, let's use the envelope generator to change the frequency of VCO2. And see, VCO1's output is not affected by the ring modulator, even though VCO1's is being input with VCO2 into the ring modulator. So you can have the crazy effect going on, but also have a frequency that you can play. So yeah. And it's basically the same thing. We can get some even more interesting outcomes by messing with the shape of the waveforms used in VCO1 and VCO2. Let's see what happens when we apply pitch to this. We'll put it on slow so it's not crazy first. Definitely some cool effects. And fast. So, okay, the thing I just did, there is so many sounds, so many possibilities. We just rolled through just trying to demonstrate this one function that, this is a very powerful synthesizer for its size. I mean, listen to all of those sounds. You can't even get those sounds from a lot of great historic synthesizers. But we could also be doing this stuff with shape. It's getting pretty noisy, but yeah, you can see where we're going with this. But yeah, the ring modulator has a huge history. It's the foundation upon which a lot of electronic music history is built. So having one in here is a historically cool thing, and having it be this functional is really, really cool. Being able to shape how oscillator 1 and oscillator 2 are combined to get the sum and differences in wave shapes, in harmonics of those two oscillators, really provides you some solid synthesis possibility here. And that's really cool. See, it doesn't have to be all Star Wars effects. It is very noisy though. Anyhow, so there is your ring modulator.